Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to What's Your Take. My name is Monisola Abosede, and I'll be taking you through the major stories that made the headlines yesterday and today. Joining me to bring you those stories today is our newscaster, Yetunde Afolabi. Good morning, Yetunde. How are you doing today?
Morning, Monisola. I'm very well this morning. Thank you. How are you doing?
Very well also, thank you. So let's get into the business of the day. President Buhari will attend the coronation of King Charles this weekend. Yesterday we mentioned that Tiwa Savage will be performing at the coronation. Today we also heard that our president is also attending. Now imagine the president and Tiwa Savage on the same stage. That should be really something interesting to see. Also, President Buhari is in the news for launching Agenda 2050 in Abuja yesterday, with 25 days left in office. So what good can come out of his proposal for the next 27 years, you would ask? Besides, we have seen ambitious ideas like this in the past that simply fizzle out. Remember Vision 2020? I think President Buhari is ready to go back to Dara, if you ask me. Okay, having dispatched the lighter issues, it is time to delve into the business of today's show. And for that, I will hand over to Yetunde, who will give us the headlines of the major news stories we have and I will be looking at today. Yetunde, over to you.
Thank you, Monisola. Today's headlines are as follows. 1. President-Elect Tinubu, during a 2-day visit to River State to commission projects, told Governor Wike he owes him nothing for constructing roads and other projects. He said the roads were for the benefit of the people of River State, and therefore the state merely lived up to its responsibility of providing infrastructure for its citizens by building the roads. The president-elect was of the opinion that the federal government should not have to reimburse state governments for infrastructure, but nonetheless encouraged Governor Wike to lobby him to make his case. Tinubu also used the opportunity to assure Nigerians that his administration would not marginalize any part of Nigeria. 2. Sudan Crisis. The first batch of stranded Nigerians landed in Abuja on Wednesday after being evacuated by Nigerian Air Force plane and Air Peace. The evacuees, numbering 376, were given 100,000 naira each by the government to use to transport themselves to their respective homes and get resettled. 3. House of Reps members. Alhassan Doguwa says the murder case he is charged with cannot stop him from vying for House Speaker. Other members of opposition parties have also thrown their hats into the contest. 4. Lastly, the Senate has approved the federal government's 22.7 trillion naira loan request from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The Nigeria Labour Congress, NLC, the Trade Union Congress, and other interest groups have kicked against the loan, saying an outgoing government should not be encumbering the incoming administration with more loans, particularly given the Buhari government's already extensive loan portfolio. The Senate says it's approved the advances to avert a government shutdown and that the move will allow the National Assembly to consider the pending 2022 supplementary budget. And those are all the headlines we have for you today. Over to you, Monisola.
Thank you so much, Yetunde. And now we shall go for a short break, and when we get right back, I'll be joined by our guest who will discuss major stories together. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
In the last 3 years, we have built a multi-purpose center, which is the envy of all in our constituency. And I can tell you that the people who are living there are already enjoying it.
Guy, do you think what this man just said is true? See, I seriously doubt. I'm sure it's one of those their silly lies.
Wait, do you know there's a way to find out if these things he's saying is true or not? This is the Construct app. It gives people like us a sure way to track implementation of constituency projects. It gives valid and verified information on location of projects, amounts allocated, amount funded, the level of job done, and even the profiles of concerned legislators. You and I can post directly on this app.
Are you serious?
This is the go-to app if you want to know how our Commonwealth is being expanded by the government.
Wow. Let's even see if what this man said is true. Show me.
The Construct app is developed by Other Paper Nigeria with support from USAID and is available on both Google Play Store and Apple Store.
And it's true.
Of course, I told you.
And welcome back. Joining me today to take a look at the big stories for today is Ope Adetayo, a freelance journalist who does work for various media outlets, including Al Jazeera. Welcome to What's Your Take, Ope Adetayo.
Yeah, thank you so much, Monisola, for having me. It's my pleasure.
So, Ope, yesterday, President-Elect Tinubu told Governor Wike of Rivers State that he owes him nothing for constructing roads and other projects. Now, Tinubu said the roads were for the benefit of the people of Rivers State, and therefore the state merely lived up to its responsibility of providing infrastructure for its citizens by building the roads. What do you think of the President-elect's position on this issue, Ope, especially when you consider the federal government has usually always reimbursed state governments for infrastructure considered to be the federal government's responsibility?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In my opinion, I don't think there is much substance and much meat to be made from this, because there is a system in place, and the federal government has to reimburse the state government for roads constructed by the by the state government, which are like constantly owed by the federal government. But what I think is the major angle here is that Governor Wike making a show of this request. I mean, this is not the first time a state governor will be making roads which belong, will be constructing roads which belong to the federal government, and we've not basically been hearing anything about it. So for him to have made a ceremony out of this issue is telling.
Wow, telling that.
Yeah, so I think, personally, considering the involvement of Governor Wike in the past election, in Rivers State specifically, he's just trying to, show how much of access he has to the incoming president, and I think for him that is quite important. The public show of power and how close he is to power. I think consider that he's an opposition member who is currently obnobbing with a rival politician. It is more than meets the eye.
Do you think this is a sign that the Tinubu administration is going to change the way things are typically done in governance since independence? Or are you think we are in for a roller coaster ride?
No, at all. I don't think this is enough example to, to make us have a rethink of, our own opinion that Tinubu would do anything differently. This is an isolated incident, and it is not in tandem with any political change or any policy change. So I don't exactly, like I said earlier when you asked the first question, I don't think there is much substance to this ceremony. It's just a power show.
All right, thank you so much for your response. And moving on to the next big story, the Sudan crisis. Now, Ope, the first batch of stranded Nigerians have landed lands in Abuja after being evacuated by the Nigerian Air Force plane and Airpeace. While this is a relief to see them back home at last, one cannot but be saddened by what they went through to get evacuated. Now, why do you think that our process was so inefficiently done?
Yeah, so this is not the first time we are seeing this, even in recent time. So if you remember the Ukraine crisis, you remember students were stranded also, and as a journalist myself, I personally covered that story, and we're just seeing a repeat of that process, and it just goes to show that Nigeria has no, I'm sure the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a template in place, but it is not a working template, right? So if something has repeated itself more than once, you know that that's a system they put in place. So it is inefficiently done, basically because there's no system in place, and also it goes to show the value the Nigerian government has put on the Nigerian lives. And so I think it is a very limited value, if you ask me. And to be honest, if there has not been a public outcry in both Ukraine and Sudan cases, trust me, those students will be there.
You think so?
Yeah, definitely. Because if you look at the old diplomatic pipeline, there's a way this thing work, right? And several countries went into Sudan to take their people and students out of there, right? So it can be different for us. It's not like we are a pariah country who has to go through a different diplomatic process to do this thing. There are templates for this. I don't work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I can tell you for a fact that like there is a system in place for this, for evacuation of people. There have always been evacuation of people from crisis hit places. Nigeria has done it in Sierra Leone and in other places in the 90s, 80s and 70s, right? So for them to, and they've done it perfectly well in the past, like example for the Sierra Leone civil war, there was swift evacuation of Nigerian citizens then. So what changed? I mean, so just like a continuous breakdown of government.
Okay, thank you so much for your response. Moving on to the next story now. Do you fault the Egyptian government, still on Sudan though, do you fault the Egyptian government for closing its borders to Nigerians?
I think you might be a bit mistaken by saying it closed the border to Nigerians, because I don't have that we specifically closed the border to Nigerians. The information I have is that we couldn't get through, Nigerians couldn't get through, and it still boils down to the diplomatic inefficiency of Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? Foreign Affairs, yeah. So, I mean, when a country is in contiguous proximity with another country at war, then it makes sense that there is heightened protection around that border. So, and if you look at Sudan specifically, it's a country whereby it's ground zero, if I can say so, for jihadist fighters. So I think security-wise, it makes sense for them to heighten border protection, security across their border. Where the fault lies in this situation is the Nigerian government not having enough diplomatic pool and not putting enough diplomatic effort in place to ensure this, safe, timely, and efficient passage of the evacuees.
Wow. So for a positive change, now what do you think would be done?
So, I mean, I don't want to sound alarmist, but looking at the security dynamics, globally now, it looks like, we are having more and more conflict, and I mean, in the past 1 year or so, we've had the Ukraine war, we've had some border skirmishes in Europe, and we, in Africa here, we've had Ethiopia Eritrea war, which has been like in the past 2-3 years. Actually, there's now a ceasefire, a diplomatic solution to that. But it just looks like, we are globally, we are at a phase where, war is now becoming the likeliest option, aggression, right? So, yeah, then, which means that we might likely be seeing more of these. So, the Nigerian government has to sit with itself and, admit the ubiquity of Nigerians across the world, because anywhere you go, you see Nigerians, and they have to admit their responsibility to evacuate Nigerians in any crisis zone, right? So, like I said, I don't work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm not a diplomat. I don't work at the embassy, so I don't know the specifics of what they have to do. But generally speaking, I think they need to have a very serious template and create a very solid pipeline. A very great system in place. They have to have that in place to make sure that there is safe passage. The embassies have to be upgraded. I mean, I can speak on that, right? The embassies, if you've ever been to embassies, Nigerian embassies abroad, pardon me, it's hell, right? So, I mean, so it's just symptomatic of the way we do things here, is what is reflecting globally. So it's just like they need to rethink their whole process to it, and they need to reevaluate the pipeline, the template on ground, if it works. Obviously it's not working, so they need to redesign it and put plans in place.
Thank you so much for your response. And we're moving on to the next story for today. House of Reps member Alhassan Doguwa says the murder case leveled against him cannot stop him from vying for House Speaker. Now, Ope, do you think a person who is on trial for a crime as heinous as murder should be allowed to contest for a leadership position in a National Assembly? We are supposed to be role models, and what does this mean if Doguwa is allowed to contest? What if he wins?
So to simply answer the question is a resounding no. But this is Nigeria where anything goes.
But Trump is also allowed to contest.
But Trump has only been indicted, he has been criminally charged, right? And I don't think any court has, found him guilty. And yeah, it might seem similar in this case, but I think, when you have the murder, when you have been charged, or like when you have murder cases of multiple people leveled against you, right? I think even the optics, I know there is the maximum of guilty until proven, right? But there is something we call optics, right? And in this case, is a very negative one to have someone who has murder case who still has to go to court to stand trial for murder, to want to lead the National Assembly, like the highest lawmaking body in the country, and to be very bold about it. I think it's just a continuation of the way we have been doing our political space, right? So if you look at the last general election and the way that it was conducted, I think this is just one of the product of it. We've seen people contest election from prison. We've seen a lot of abnormalities, within the political and electoral spaces. But I think in recent time, the 2023 general elections were brazen in a way that could produce this kind of results.
Oh, so it's no shock.
Yeah, it's no shock. We are Nigerians, and it's no shock. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your response. Our final story for today is the funny loan request of the federal government, for 22.7 trillion naira from the Central Bank of Nigeria for something called Ways and Means. And the Senate has now approved this loan request. With only 23 days left for the administration to leave office, there has been a huge outcry that the last-minute loan approval creates room for suspicion. Now, is the money to further the needs of the outgoing politicians as they leave office? Now, are they simply trying to secure their retirement at the expense of ordinary Nigerians? What do you think? What out there is that we could be paying for those loans for the next 50 years. Now, what do you think, Ope? Should the Senate have approved this loan?
I think it has been approved already, right?
Yes.
So, I think there's a need of a bit of a backstory in this to answer this question. So, this particular Ways and Means, mechanism, it's a way for, it should be a last resort, right? For the federal government of Nigeria. Is like when you can access loan anywhere else in the world, right? You can fall back to your central bank, and I think it was a mechanism which was designed under the Obasanjo presidency when Charles Soludo was the CBN governor. And I think, yes, it is a fantastic idea, but if there is one thing that stands out, with Buhari's presidency, it is the way he has abused the Central Bank of Nigeria. Constitutionally, the CBN is a standalone institution with the president and having limited control over, right? And if there's anything to go by, you could, pardon me, see the CBN being in bed with Buhari presidency, and they bent to their, to them, they are, at their whims and caprices. And so the relationship between this CBN and this outgoing presidency is one that is, like, I think, unprecedented. We haven't seen this, level of submission of the central, like elsewhere in the world, because it's not even like elsewhere in the way it's been laid out in the Constitution. The CBN is a separate institution on its own, and that independence, which had been granted to the CBN, is to protect the integrity of the institution, and of course to protect the country, because if the CBN runs down, the country is, like, messed up, right? So, and it's a check and balance mechanism. But this CBN under the Governor Emefiele and President Buhari, if it's anything to go by, it is a stark contrast with what should be. And so the ways and means, this is not the first time it's been abused. If you're familiar with the relationship between the CBN and the presidency that we have now. And so this is, for me, a last checkout, and it is quite insane, to put it, frankly and honest. It's quite insane that less than 30 days to you leaving office, you are taking such a humongous loan, which, like, the way it's been structured, is going to be paid even by the next generation. And when you put that into, like, the debt profile of Nigeria at the moment, I think it is a deliberate effort to, like, wreck this country. So if you're asking me, should the Senate approve? I think they've approved it already. So
is it right?
Apparently it's not right, and it's deadly.
Okay. Thank you so much for your response, and that is where we must rest it today. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Ope Adetayo, thank you for coming. It's been an engaging time.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you, Nigeria, for being a part of today's program. Join us next time as we bring to you analysis of the breaking news that made the headlines today and every day. My name is Monisola Abosede. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.